It is 11:15. We are going to get started again. And let's see. It is now time for me to call upon Ruth Shapiro.
Marilyn Cohen is a longtime member of Best Chickless Synagogue. She was executive director of Merkaz Canada and the Canadian Foundation for Masorti Judaism. She has worked as the alumni coordinator for Community Hebrew Academy of Toronto, Chad. She is past Sisterhood president, 1984 to 86. Marilyn is currently an executive member of the INR, as well as International Torah Fund vice president of our region. She was a longtime synagogue board member at Beth Tikva, has sung in the choir since 1976, and is actively involved in all musical programming in the synagogue. In her spare time, Marilyn loves to dance, garden, and play golf. She has two married daughters, Naomi and Deborah, and much of her time is lovingly spent with her 5 grandchildren. Marilyn Cohen.
Thank you, Ruth. Everyone hear me? For your generous introduction. Hi, everyone. I'm delighted to have this opportunity to bring you up to date on the latest developments related to Torah Fund. Since today is the 28th day of the counting of the Omer, it reminded me that many use this period for self-improvement, and the counting focuses us on mindfulness. This counting also reminds us that we are fast approaching the end of this year's Biachad Torah Fund campaign, which ends shortly after Shavuot. Let us be mindful of the time that is passing in these weeks to consider the impact our donations have on the ambitions of our committed students in our 5 conservative Masorti seminaries around the world. Torah Fund allows them to excel in their studies and make the most of their potential in service to our people. Biyachad, together, we can have a strong finish to this year's campaign. To that end, I would like to invite our International Torah Fund Chair, who happens to be Barbara Ezring, our conference consultant, to say a few words of encouragement for us all. Barbara.
I'm so happy to be with you at your region conference. I'm Barbara Ezring, International Chair of Women's League for Conservative Judaism's Philanthropy, Torah Fund. What an amazing and challenging year of fundraising we're having. Our usual approaches to raising money have been tweaked. Very special volunteers followed unique protocols to go to JTS to sort, pack, and label Torah Fund pins. Many pins traveled to a variety of cities before they reached their destinations. And some pins are still on their way to their recipients. You developed virtual Torah Fund events that wowed. You introduced your members to students and graduates of all 5 institutions of higher Jewish learning that we support. You studied Torah, learned about foods and customs in the cities of our seminaries, heard beautiful music, visited museum exhibits, mixed drinks, and honored special people in your communities. Everyone had fun. But most important, Sisterhood Torah Fund chairs and vice presidents maintained relationships with our Torah Fund donors. Thank you so much. And thank you to your Region Torah Fund Vice President. You trained, organized, emailed, phoned, attended meetings, supported your sisterhoods, and created region-wide virtual events. It is always the right time to donate to Torah Fund. Your gifts to the Torah Fund General Campaign provide programming and scholarships for students who attend the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York, Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies in Los Angeles, Schechter Institutes in Jerusalem, Seminario Rabbinico Latino-Americano in Buenos Aires, and Zacharias Frankel College in Potsdam. Contributions to the special project, Creating New Spaces, will be used at Ziegler for the Women's League Institute on Gender Bias and Harassment, and at JTS for the Women's League Study Space in the new undergraduate residence hall. Plan for the future. Join the Torah Fund Legacy Society and ensure the future for the students of our institutions of higher Jewish learning with your bequest. We are so grateful for your creativity, your enthusiasm, and your patience during this challenging year. Toda rabah to each of you for your continued support and donations to Torah Fund. B'yachad, together, we guarantee Jewish continuity.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you for your leadership and guidance this past year during these very challenging times. There were so many hurdles to overcome, and Barbara, with the help of her team, confronted them with calmness, intelligence, and dedication. We are so very thankful for all the work you do on behalf of Torah Fund. Our students that we support with our Torah Fund dollars are eager to show their gratitude and appreciation of our efforts. They are the direct beneficiaries of what we do, so I thought it appropriate to hear from them directly. The following short video highlights the students, programs, and philosophy of our newest seminary, the Zacharias Frankel College in Germany.
Als ich mich dafür entschieden habe, Rabbinerin zu werden, standen mir die Türen von vielen Ausbildungsstätten offen. Der Grund, warum ich mich dann für das Zacharias Frankel Kolleg entschieden habe, ist, weil ich teilhaben wollte an diesem Projekt, ein neues Judentum zu denken innerhalb des Zentrums Europas.
For me, it came at the right time. I just moved to Berlin. Coming out of Israel and coming into Berlin, my Jewish identity, my Jewish practice became more and more relevant and more important. I started being in touch with people, and people were kind of asking me questions, and we were doing Shabbat services at my house. Yeah, I kind of started to feel a bit like a rabbi. And then I heard that they were opening the Zacharias Frankel College in Berlin, and I was loving Berlin. So everything fit together and I joined.
Das Wichtige an Masorti oder das Entscheidende ist, dass es wirklich halachisch fundiert ist, also dass ein großes Augenmerk auf das jüdische Religionsgesetz gelegt wird, aber dass es immer im Zusammenspiel tatsächlich mit den modernen Fragen auch betrachtet wird. Weltweit gibt es insgesamt 5 Masorti-Rabbiner-Seminare. Zacharias Frankel wurde 1854 der Gründungsdirektor vom Jüdisch-Theologischen Seminar in Breslau. Und aus Breslau sind dann sehr viele Impulse ausgegangen. Später ist es zur Gründung vom Jewish Theological Seminary in New York gekommen. Wir kooperieren mit der Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies in Los Angeles, die an der Westküste sitzt. Und es gibt in Buenos Aires in Argentinien noch das Seminario Rabbinico und dann natürlich in Israel das Schechter Institute, wozu das Schechter Rabbinical Seminary gehört.
Also das Zacharias Frankel College gibt all seinen Studenten die Möglichkeit, sich frei zu entfalten. Sie versuchen, die Tradition authentisch und intensiv zu leben, aber gleichzeitig an das moderne Leben anzupassen. Das schlägt sich vor allem in einer gewissen Toleranz nieder, dass wir alle Menschen willkommen heißen, auf alle Juden zugehen wollen. Das ist unser Leitmotto.
So I brought the Gebetbuch für die neue Synagoge in Berlin, Oranienburger. The emphasis on tradition, Hebrew, but also Talmud study. In a lot of seminaries, you get a very broad education of Jewish studies, but you don't get the opportunity to study Talmud so much. And I really wanted to focus on rabbinical texts and on Talmud, and you can do that at Zacharias.
¿Esto cómo lo hacías, la pausa esta? Para mí lo más importante es que somos un grupo muy internacional de estudiantes de todas las partes del mundo. Creo que no hay nadie que venga del mismo país. Y eso hace que nos enriquezcamos muchísimo más. La perspectiva que cada estudiante da desde su punto de vista, desde la comunidad a la que pertenece, desde el país del que viene y desde la diferente educación que ha tenido.
Hola.
Ich bin auch jemand, der dort sehr gut hinpasst. Einmal natürlich, weil ich dort Freunde habe, die auch wie eine Familie in gewisser Form sind, aber auch, weil ich dort eine sehr gute Lerngruppe habe. Also Leute, mit denen ich gerne studiere. Wir helfen einander, wir verbringen viel Zeit miteinander.
שלוש מסוים וחמישה נויסים ונויסים וגויים בשבעו.
במה?
רבן שמעון מגמליאל אומר בשלושה מתחילה על מה? על עיבור החודש, עיבור השנה.
עיבור השנה בשיבה.
אבל לא עושים את זה בכל עיר, רק בירושלים.
אולי עיבור פרטי של כל עיר בגדול.
Ich schätze das Studium in Berlin sehr, eben auch durch die kulturelle Vielfalt, die Berlin als Stadt mit sich bringt.
One of the great things about Berlin is that you have many Jewish communities and there are many different opportunities to find your niche somewhere.
So part of our 5-year learning curriculum is 1 year in Israel, in Jerusalem. We study at the Conservative Yeshiva in Jerusalem, and that's probably the most influential part of my studies, I'd say, for me.
Aussi, c'est bien d'être à la yeshiva parce que tu connais les autres rabbins du monde, surtout des États-Unis, mais tu connais aussi les rabbins qui viennent du séminario de Buenos Aires, et aussi tu connais les gens qui viennent de Londres. Et donc, c'était très enrichissant de connaître tous ces gens et de voir comment ils faisaient aussi.
Ich glaube, dass zukünftig Rabbiner und Rabbinerinnen in Deutschland viel mehr auch auf außergemeindlichen Ebenen arbeiten werden müssen. Das bezieht sich auf Studentengruppen, Schulunterricht, soziale Netzwerke. Das Gemeindeleben wird natürlich auch zukünftig wichtig sein. Aber ich denke, dass gerade auch wir im Frankel College wissen, dass der klassische Gemeindeberuf nicht das Einzige ist, was dem Rabbiner oder der Rabbinerin offen steht und von Interesse und Wichtigkeit sein wird.
I think at the time at the Frankel College, I've learned also to trust myself, that I have something to give to the world, and also not to trust myself too much. I think to keep asking questions.
Étudier ici à Berlin, au Zacharias Frankel, ça veut dire pour moi qu'on a une opportunité magnifique d'être au milieu de l'Europe, mais il faut être conscient que c'est à nous de faire notre propre chemin.
Wow. Were you not moved as much as I was when I saw that for the first time? These are the faces of the real people that you are helping with your Torah Fund donations. The students of all our seminaries are so enthusiastic, committed, and dedicated to their future roles as leaders in their communities. And now we know we can help.
I'm so happy to be with you
Wait.
at your region conference. I'm Barbara
Mark,
Ezring,
turn that off.
National Chair of Women's League for Conservative Judaism's Philanthropy, Torah Fund.
Turn that off, please.
What an amazing and challenging year of fundraising we're having.
Mark? Sorry, that should not have been it. Let's go back. Okay, so what I was saying was these were amazing students, and the students at all our seminaries are so enthusiastic, committed, and dedicated to their future roles as leaders in their communities. And now we know we can help them attain their goals through our generous support of Torah Fund. Now I'd like to highlight a number of challenges we've faced this year. We have a unique region because INR is comprised of sisterhoods from Canada as well as the United States. And surprise, surprise, though we have many things in common, we are different in several important aspects, especially when it comes to our differing federal tax laws. That's why we haven't yet found a way that Canadians can use a credit card to donate to the Torah Fund online via our Torah Fund website. Americans, on the other hand, have the distinct advantage that enables them to donate any amount online on the donate page of our Torah Fund website. Let me stop here and make sure everyone, whether Canadian or American, knows how to access our Torah Fund website. If you can't remember the address, jtsa.edu/TorahFund, just Google Torah Fund and click the option that says Torah Fund Jewish Theological Seminary, not the Women's League one. You get to the main page and scroll down to the Torah Fund information. See on the right are boxed options to choose. If you're an American and wish to make a donation, you simply click on the donate box. Once there, you can make a straight donation or choose either of 2 e-cards to send out, or there's the option of a meaningful personal tribute letter mailed by the office in memory or in honor of someone for a minimum of $28 donation. All donations sent from this donate page will be credited to the donor's sisterhood, providing that information is entered on the page, and the donor's name will be recorded by the office. Everyone, Canadians, Americans, notice that this page also highlights all 5 of our Biachad General Campaign seminaries. Each are underlined, which means that these are direct links to their websites, where you can find a wealth of Jewish knowledge and meet their faculty and students. Now, if you click on the 4th box down, you arrive at Synagogue Sisterhoods, which when you scroll down, you can click on Find Resources or request student speakers, etc. Click on Find Resources to find all the Torah Fund forms and brochures. Please note, if you want to print anything from this page, you first click on the image, then go to the top right of the screen, click on Download, and then direct download, and only then will you be able to actually print or copy your image. Another box for Americans to choose on the website is for the new e-card platform, which was introduced this year and contains 5 beautiful card designs with more coming in the future. Starting at $5 per recipient, purchasers have the option of making an additional contribution of any amount to Torah Fund, and they can specify when they'd like the card to be sent out. For purchasers who indicate their sisterhood at the end of the campaign cycle, each sisterhood will be credited with the total revenue from this platform, but the names of the donors will not be recorded. If you have already done so, please try accessing. If you haven't already done so, please try accessing our user-friendly website. Take a virtual trip through all it has to offer. You will learn so much and will actually enjoy the experience. Let's get back to how Canadians donate to Torah Fund, if not on the website. Well, they have to send a check or cash to their sisterhood's Torah Fund chair. They can order Torah Fund tribute cards, which they can either mail themselves or have the chair do the mailing. Cards were another challenge this year for everybody. Because the JTS building had to be closed due to COVID, new cards could not be accessed to send out. But luckily, all INR Torah Fund chairs have been able to help each other and have shared their stocks of Torah Fund cards amongst themselves. The last update I received informed us that they have come up with a solution and are hoping to have the cards available in the very near future. The same JTS closure affected our Torah Fund pins. I'm sure you know that pins are a gift received for donations that are $180 or higher, and many donors have still not even received their Biachad pins this year. However, I was told this week that they have come up with a plan to get those pins and cards out very soon. Now, regarding credit card donations for US donors, the Torah Fund office can no longer accept credit card donations that used to be written down and sent by the Torah Fund chairs on their accompanying lists of names, which we call the transmittal forms. Too many errors have occurred in transferring these numbers onto paper and then sending them by mail or email. And as we know, security is a huge concern these days. The only way to pay by credit card is either online, as we mentioned before, or the donor herself can call the Torah Fund office in New York, leave a message for Cheryl Moss Solomon to 212-678-8977 to call them back, and then they can give their information personally over the phone. Again, that's for US donors only. I did encounter one advantage Canadians have over Americans. The office has told us that American sisterhoods should no longer submit an aggregate check. That's when one check came into the office along with names and addresses of all the donors, and the Torah Fund office was expected to record all the names and send the receipts to each donor. The office is now unable to process these names. Therefore, all American checks must be made out to Torah Fund when sent to the Torah Fund office. If a sisterhood has no alternative but to send one check representing a number of donors, then that total amount will be listed as coming from the sisterhood, and the sisterhood or synagogue will have to do the receipting. No individual names will be recorded. In contrast, Canadians can send an aggregate check because the Canadian Torah Fund affiliate called Jewish Theological Society has an accountant who is able to process all necessary tax receipts, whether received individually or as an aggregate check. The accountant also will accept over the phone a credit card donation if it's over $100, but please inform your Torah Fund chair or VP so that the proper transmittal form can accompany those funds that eventually get transferred to New York. Without that transmittal form, checks have actually gone missing until found after a thorough search. All the details I've spoken about are only there to help each of our sisterhoods do the best they can for Torah Fund. At the beginning of each year, as Torah Fund VP, I discuss with each Torah Fund chair what they think they can achieve for that year, and together we set their Torah Fund goal. As I have done in the past, I now want to proudly acknowledge the 11 sisterhoods in our region who met or exceeded their Torah Fund goals for the 2019-2020 Torah Fund campaign. Beth David Women, Beth Jacob Synagogue. Beth David Women is in Toronto, Beth Jacob Synagogue in Hamilton. Beth Tikva Women, Toronto. Beth Tzedek Sisterhood, Toronto. Congregation Or Shalom Sisterhood in London, Ontario. Shaarei Zedek Sisterhood in Montreal. Sisterhood of Congregation Beth Shalom Hever Shas, DeWitt. Temple Adath Yeshurun Sisterhood, Syracuse. Temple Beth El Sisterhood, Rochester. Temple Beth Joseph Sisterhood, Herkimer. And Women's Network of Temple Beth Tzedek, Williamsville, which is Buffalo. Mazel tov to all our sisterhoods who reached their goals last year. I must tell you, I have been in awe of the originality and creativity that has gone into so many of our Torah Fund programs, especially during these crazy times. Thank you to everyone who helped raise awareness of the importance of Torah Fund. This just in, the Torah Fund office has asked that all Torah Fund checks be sent into the office by May 17th because of the slow postal service and the extra burden of processing the funds remotely. Online donations will be accepted up to the end of our fiscal year, which is the end of June. There is so much more I could speak about, but because of time constraints, I'm just going to mention one more issue that is close to my heart. I'm talking about the Legacy Society. This is a planned giving initiative that's been around a long time, but was recently renamed. If the purpose of Torah Fund is important to you, if you understand the need to support our amazing students in our 5 conservative Masorti seminaries, if you want your support to continue even after you're gone, and if you want to impart your commitment to your family, joining the Legacy Society is your ticket to do so. All you do is simply allocate in your will any amount as a bequest to Torah Fund. It can be in the form of assets, a percentage of your estate, stocks, life insurance proceeds, or cash. Again, there is no correct amount. Any amount is appreciated. As the wife, as an estate planning lawyer, I've long since understood the importance of updating one's will about every 10 years. So I encourage you to please consider adding a bequest to Torah Fund in your next update, or you can simply add a simple amendment called a codicil to your will. Of course, your professional advisor would have to be consulted, but the Torah Fund office has developed all the proper wording needed for both Americans and Canadians to ensure the funds are allocated properly. All the details you need to know are on our website, or you're welcome to contact me for information. Once you've signed and sent in your declaration of intent form, and in recognition of your commitment to the future, you will receive a legacy charm which can be worn proudly with your Torah Fund pin, like mine. When you make a legacy gift, you will join a group of dedicated visionaries who value education and the future of the conservative movement. I hope I shed some light on how Torah Fund works in our region and why it is vital in ensuring that our legacy is passed down to future generations of conservative Jews. If you haven't already given your annual donation to Torah Fund, or if you've been inspired to give more, please be sure to contact your own Torah Fund chair to do so. I proudly pass on the torch to Linda Boxer, who will be your next Torah Fund VP, and wish her the best of luck in her work on your behalf. Thank you to everyone for your generous support of Torah Fund, and I wish you an exciting and prosperous Torah Fund campaign next year. B'hatzlacha and toda rabah.
And again, toda rabah to Barbara for her words of inspiration, and to Marilyn. Marilyn, you have been absolutely terrific as Torah Fund VP for these past few years. It's been a pleasure working with you. Thank you now for your words of wisdom, for being so inspiring to us to want to contribute more. And we all know how very near and dear Torah Fund is to all of us. So thank you very, very much. And yeah, very nice. Thank you. It is now my pleasure to introduce Esther Rakusin. She is a native of the Washington, D.C. area, but she has lived in Ithaca, New York for over 26 years. Now, this is way above my head. She is a former cell biology researcher and now considers herself a professional volunteer. In addition to volunteering at her synagogue with her sisterhood chapter and with Women's League, Esther also volunteers with many other local organizations, and some of those are WRFI Community Radio News in Ithaca, Watkins Glen, Cornell Botanical Gardens in Ithaca, and the Public Education Initiative and Love Living at Home. She is a sisterhood past president and has held other positions on her sisterhood's board. She currently is the buyer and operator of the Sisterhood Judaica shop at Temple Beth El, but she hopes to hand that position on to someone else in the near future. Don't we all? Before the COVID outbreak, she chaired the OK Committee at her synagogue, working to coordinate onyx and kiddushes. Presently, she serves as our region's Vice President of Education and Programming, which she will inform us about. Last but not least, Esther is the mom of 2 adult children, Franny, age 23, and Marty, age 20, and is the proud wife of Eric. Take it away, Esther. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Linda. And I'm sending love from our sisterhood chapter. Actually, our congregational meeting is happening right now, so there may not be any of our sisterhood attending right now, but I will try to, send the word from them. So thanks for letting me talk today. And I have the happy experience of having been scooped a few times already this morning. And when I say scooped, what I mean is that our consultant, Barbara Esring, Rabbi Wolins Fields, and Debbie Kainer-Goldich have already talked about some of the education and programming that's going on with Women's League right now. So I won't have to talk about it as much, but I think, as Barbara really emphasized, all the women of the various sisterhoods in our region can get access to all these programs by joining the Women's League, getting their password from Rachel Kessler, and also by going to the links that are on the e-newsletters that are coming out sometimes bi-weekly, sometimes weekly. So stay tuned to all of those Women's League newsletters. So the last time that I spoke was in 2019 in June, and that was at Temple Beth David in North York. And that wasn't actually my last time in Canada. I actually visited with my sisters in September of that year, but I kind of miss being back in Canada. But I really hope that I'll have the chance to, travel across the border soon and maybe visit some of you. But it was really nice to talk about education and programming at that time. Since then, as you all know, we're all on Zoom, and pretty much anyone can attend any program via Zoom. So I just want to go to our next slide. Okay, so Women's League offers a lot of different educational offerings, religious study and book clubs. We'll go to the next slide. Already you heard about the weekly Words of Torah presented by Rabbi Ellen Wolins Fields, Makom B'Yachad, which is a really fantastic opportunity to meet other women at noon every weekday to learn Psalm study, Pirkei Avot and Kaddish, have the chance to say Kaddish, and also Minyan Ahava, which is a monthly service for individuals with memory loss and their caregivers. Next slide. You can also access courses being given by the Schechter Institutes of Jewish Learning in Jerusalem. And there are new offerings that started last week. And you can access these by going to links in the e-newsletter. Next slide. Also, there are days of studies that sisterhoods can use to encourage their members to study different Jewish liturgies. And of course, the sisterhoods can all study together via Zoom. All of these are listed again on the website, the Women's League website. And Shavuot is coming up, so sisterhoods can learn together the Book of Ruth as one example. Next slide. Also, I think as Barbara mentioned, we had online Hebrew prayer book learning going on this year, and also bat mitzvah classes. I'm not sure if these will be offered next year, but I certainly hope so. And I'm guessing that people can find out about them by looking at their e-newsletters. Next slide. A new course that's being offered now is called Life Enhancing Learning, How to Live Forever. The first 2 sessions have already passed, and I'm sure that they can be accessed online. And there's one more session coming up this Tuesday on April 27th, being given by Ellen Kainer-Bresnik, who will talk about how do I make my, my story sound the way I want. So this is all about how sisterhood members can talk about their lives and how they can pass them down to their relatives and how they can preserve their legacy and pass it along. Next slide. Also, Barbara referenced a Women's League Reads Books. And this is a really fantastic program that is ongoing. The most recent program took place last month, and it was a virtual poetry reading starring a panel of 4 different poets who got a chance to read their poetry and discuss it with the people attending the session. And I'm sure that there will be books coming up in coming months. And next slide. Also, Barbara referenced the Personal Conversations program, which is, I think, really fascinating. And she did mention that the most recent conversation was about organ donation and featured a number of different speakers talking about the different aspects of donation. So I just recommend that people try to tune into the upcoming Personal Conversations. Next slide. And finally, there are other educational programs that can be accessed through the Jewish Theological Seminary and the American Jewish University. Both offer varied learning opportunities. And again, you can find out about them and find links on the Women's League e-newsletters. Next slide. Next slide. Moving on to programming. I mean, education and programming really are more or less the same thing, but here we're going to talk about some programming that is a little bit different from religious study. So Women's League offers sisterhood chapters a showcase of programs so that they can come up with, they can use some of these programming ideas and also share ideas, okay? So next slide. A new thing that you can find in the e-newsletter is the programming idea of the week. And there was one that was posted a little earlier this month about an April 10th virtual tour of a historical community in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And I thought that this was a really fascinating program idea. And next slide. I wanted to just give a little bit of a shout out to some of the programming that was hosted at my own temple, Sisterhood. And earlier this year, we had a program where a professional scholar from our local Museum of Art at Cornell, the Johnson Museum of Art, she presented a program called Masks Across Culture. We're also having a bi-weekly chai tea or chai tea and lunch virtual get together. And that's held bi-weekly at noon, and women can just join into that via Zoom. Also, we recently had a presentation on how to start listening to podcasts and how to maybe host your own podcast. And that was presented by our Sisterhood president's husband, John Dobbins. And coming up, we're going to be having our own presentation on reimagining the Balabusta, which it looks like a number of different Sisterhood chapters have had their own presentations from Rabbi Dahlia Bernstein. And also, I didn't put this on my slide, but I wanted to just give a brief mention of some cool programs that we had already a year ago after the beginning of the pandemic, which had to do with lowering stress and eating well during these really difficult times. They were both presented by a member of our sisterhood, Nancy Molina, who is a nutritionist. And she gave two presentations. The first one was how to eat well during stressful times. And the second program was how to eat well during Passover, which for some people is like really important if you find yourself eating too much matzah. So those were two really fascinating programs that I enjoyed quite a bit. And if people are interested, I can share more information about them later on. Next slide. Women's League is also sharing information about wellness and learning as well. And the most recent program was in last November. It was a session with Naomi Malka, the director of the Adas Israel Community Mikvah. And that was a really interesting program about how members of their synagogue are using the mikvah right now. And actually that's my home synagogue. So I found it to be especially interesting. When I say home synagogue, where I grew up. Next slide. Probably most women who are attending this conference know about the Jewels in the Crown programs. This is a way for sisterhoods to share their very favorite and most meaningful programs. And I imagine that this is still ongoing, that sisterhoods can apply to present their programs to this, this particular way of sharing. And probably in a few years at the next international conference, women will be sharing their sisterhood's favorite programs. And then on WLCJ.net, which is a listserv, Sherry Lynn Rubin, the moderator, is asking sisterhood members to share ideas of their favorite program on this listserv. Next slide. Just to conclude, I wanted to re-emphasize that women attending this conference can access so much information about education and programming on the Women's League website. And as Barbara mentioned, you can find it at WLCJ.org. And to access Women's League member resources, you need to register as a member. You'll get a password from Rosal Kessler, and that is her information, her contact info. And finally, I'd just like to acknowledge the current Women's League Education co-chairs, Ellen Bresnick and Julia Loeb, the Women's League Reads co-chairs, Meryl Karas and Susan Farber, programming chair, Grace Schessler Program Activity Chair, Karen Seltzer. Also, as you heard, our International President, Debbie Kaner-Goldich, and Rabbi Wolintz Fields, Sherry Lynn Rubin, the moderator of WLCJNet, and our Sisterhood of Temple Beth El in Ithaca programming co-chairs, Marcia Kepex and Joanne Zager, and our chapter president, Gail Zussman. And finally, Lois Silverman, I'd just like to thank you for doing an amazing job at posting e-newsletters and blogging and getting all the information up on the website. So I think that is how I will conclude. And I know that we have maybe about 9 minutes till break, and I wasn't sure if this is something we could do, but if any women attending would like to give a shout out about their sisterhoods, programs coming up, anything that they want to brag about, I thought it'd be cool to make that opportunity happen. Or if anybody has a question for me, I can try to offer information. So again, thank you to all of you for listening. And I hope I can meet you in person someday. Soon. I mean, I've met many of you in person, but hopefully someday soon we'll get together in person. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Does anyone have any questions for Esther or anything to share? There are so many things going on with, actually, with everything. You could sit in front of your computer all day long and all night long. And thank you for bringing so much knowledge that we can do and learn. And I mean, that's part of being part of Women's League, that we are always learning, and it's wonderful. There are so many things. And I know that Esther's available. If you ever have any questions or whatever, please feel free to contact her. And I know that all of us have been doing wonderful programming via Zoom. So this is the new age. But thank you, Esther. Thank you so much. And I guess if there's no questions, we're going to move right along to our state of the region. Our next speaker really needs no introduction. Joan, thank you for all that you have done for us these past 3 years. Unbelievable. I know that I'll be very honest, I know that you were unsure about taking over the leadership, but you were just absolutely wonderful. You contacted every single sisterhood president. You were informed about everything. You were wonderful. And it's been very difficult. So thank you for everything that you've done. And I mean, everyone knows, well, some of us know Joan's bio, but just thank you. And I'm going to let her take right over. And without further ado, here is Joan. So. Well, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Of course. Linda, thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. And I will get right to it. I like to say that cliches are cliche for a reason, and that is because they are true. The cliche that I'm going to quote now is that time flies when you are having fun. And boy, is that ever true. I simply cannot believe that 3 years have come and gone. I hope you will indulge me a bit, as I did not have an installation 3 years ago. So bear with me as I embellish the State of the Region speech with a bit of my own personal history. Little did I know when I attended the International Northeast Region Spring Conference in April of 2018, just down the road in Rochester, New York, that several of you would approach me and say, Joan, we want you to be our next region president. I am not certain how I replied, whether it was no or what. Nevertheless, here we are. I also recall that following the conference, there were many phone calls with Rusty Zackheim, Eleanor Diamond, Linda Steinhorn, Margie Miller, and a few others, all of whom said, Joan, you should do it. and they each had a million different reasons why I should. But what I don't think any of them told me was how much I would personally gain from taking on the position. All of the wonderful women I would meet and get to know. I feel truly blessed to have been able to work with some of the best, but more on that in a bit. If I'm being totally honest, my journey to become region president started long before the 2018 region conference. It actually was at a meeting of my sisterhood at Temple Adith Yeshurun in Syracuse, when Cheryl Patt brought then International President Corey Schneider to speak. I, of course, made the mistake of asking a question. I will never forget when Cheryl turned her gaze upon me and said, "Well, Joni," I do think that was the beginning of the end for me. But when I was sitting down to write this, I took a look back at what I wrote when I was when I was installed as the sisterhood president in 2010. And it turns out that my journey actually started with USY and Camp Ramah. But the first sentence of that installation speech began with, "If I had a nickel for every time I said, I will never be sisterhood president." Well, I am here to tell you, never say never. It was only a short time after that initial meeting with Corey that Cheryl insisted that I attend Leadership Institute in 2009. That is where I met Margie Miller and Carol Simon, who were leading Leadership Institute at that time. When Margie found out that I was from Syracuse, she said, "Oh, I went to Cazenovia College and I'm on the board there." Well, that began yearly visits with Margie when she came to town, and that was the beginning of a wonderful friendship. And let me tell you, Margie is always grooming future leaders. But when it came to me taking on this position, I had every excuse in the book. "But I've never been on region board," I said. "That is okay," they all replied. "You have been a sisterhood president, you have been to Leadership Institute, and you have been to conferences and convention. And we will be there to help you," they all said. Any objection I raised, they all had an answer. I am here to tell you that I'm grateful that I said yes. This has been a wonderful, inspiring journey, and I thank you all for pushing me to do it. And each one of them who said that they would be there for me, they were. So from that region conference in Rochester, I next went to region president's training in New York, where I met the inspiring and fabulous Rabbi Ellen Woolens Fields, who had just taken the position of Women's League Executive Director. And I met the 12 other region presidents, as well as other leaders within the organization. All women I consider myself lucky to have been able to work with and get to know. And then we were off. Region board meetings on Zoom, the many, many emails to our sisterhood presidents, and of course, the frantic texts, emails, and phone calls to my mentors for words of advice. While the pandemic prevented me from fulfilling my goal of visiting all of the sisterhoods in the region, I can say that in April of 2018, I was in Rochester when I was asked to be region president. Does that count as a visit? And now I am virtually in Buffalo for this conference. Does that count?
Absolutely.
And I do live in DeWitt, within walking distance of Congregation Beth Shalom Kavrashas. Can I count that? But in all seriousness, before the pandemic curtailed all of our travel, I was able to visit Toronto in March of 2019 for a wonderful Sisterhood Shabbat with Beth David Women, a trip on which I was accompanying Margie Miller, who had been invited to give the Devar Torah on Shabbat. Margie and I also had the opportunity to attend an event at Beth Tikva Women on Sunday of that weekend as well. In May of 2019, I was able to travel to Montreal for the joint Torah Fund event of the Sisterhoods of Sherry Zion and Sherry Zedek. The event was entitled Pushing Against Prejudice, a conversation with Indigenous leaders. One of the speakers we heard from was Nina Segalowitz, a 60s scoop survivor who many of you know we would again encounter in our newly established region programming. I did try to get to Temple Bethel and Ithaca a couple of times, but each time a snowstorm curtailed those trips. And of course, there were many, many meetings on Zoom with our conference committees for 2019 and 2021. Many thanks to conference chairs Ruth Shapiro, Rusty Zackheim, and Linda Steinhorn. And although she would not take the title of co-chair, I simply cannot fail to mention all the work that Doreen Bornfriend did for our conference in 2019 as well. And many thanks to all of the women who worked tirelessly on both of these conferences, as well as the fabulous conference consultants that we were blessed with, Renee Ravitch in 2019 and Barbara Esring this year. As much as the pandemic curtailed my in-person visits to sisterhoods in the region, I have to say that in my opinion, it actually may have been a bit of a blessing in disguise for us. I know that may seem like an unusual thing to say about a pandemic, but hear me out. Not long after the pandemic began, we found ourselves on Zoom. We instituted bi-monthly region programming, which has been a resounding success. We have had an author interview with Jennifer Rosner, who wrote The Yellow Bird Sings, an interview with Nina Segalowitz, Zen Tangle with the Central Great Lakes Region Arts and Crafts Chairs for a Hanukkah craft, and most recently, an author interview with Elizabeth Bettina, who wrote It Happened in Italy. These programs have been well attended, have brought us together as a region, and we look forward to seeing you all at more programs in the future. Many, many thanks to the programming committee of Adele Weinstein, Dorothy Tonchin, Carol Burke, Fran Kane, and Toby Mazer. I am so proud of what we have built, Biachad, together. I would like to thank my executive committee for all of your hard work over these past 3 years. And please forgive me for making one special mention as I honor the memory of a very special lady. When I came into office, our membership vice president was Leona Elligberg, Zichronah Livracha. May her memory forever be for a blessing.
Amen. Amen.
I am going to ask that you bear with me as I make just a couple of additional special mentions. I could not have done any of this without a few special people. First, one of those women who cornered me in Rochester 3 years ago, Toby Mazer. Thank you, Toby.
I got
a wealth of knowledge, and I have to admit that it was pretty handy having a women's league consultant in my own backyard. I would also like to thank Rusty Zackheim, the other woman who cornered me in Rochester 3 years ago. Rusty is a walking encyclopedia when it comes to the international Northeast region, per capita, and finances. I would also like to thank my assigned mentor, Carol Simon, for all of her words of wisdom, and of course, for proofreading my articles at the last minute. And last, but certainly not least, Lois Silverman, who every 2 weeks sent me an email that said, article? Lois, you have the patience of a saint, and I thank you for dealing with my habitual lateness. And with all that said, I now leave you in the very capable hands of your incoming region president, Marilyn Cohen, a woman whom I have said to anyone who would listen should have been region president before me. But again, it took a pandemic for her to realize that she could, in fact, govern us from Florida on Zoom. Thank you all so much. And now I'm going to take just a few moments to award our sisterhoods in the region with their affiliation certificates. And we are going to start with the Sisterhood of Temple Bethel in Ithaca. who has been affiliated with Women's League for 65 years. The Sisterhood of Sherry Zion Congregation in Montreal, who has been affiliated for 75 years with Women's League. The Sisterhood of Temple Bethel in Utica, who has been affiliated for 100 years. My own sisterhood, Temple Adith Yeshurun in Syracuse, also 100 years. And the one who beats us all, Temple Bethel Sisterhood in Rochester, New York, where I was asked to be Sisterhood Region President, 101 years affiliated with Women's League. Thank you all from the bottom of my heart.
Joan, thank you. I mean, you truly are an embolism, of the right word, of Women's League, of sisterhood. Thank you for all that you've done. You are our light. You have been just an inspiration, and we are just thrilled that you are part. Thank you. Just wonderful. You know, thank you for all that you've done. I can't even, yeah, where did the time go? Just want you to know that your dedication and your hard work has really been our guiding light. And speaking of light and candles, we have sent you a gift. I hope that you have it. We are I am presenting you with this gift. I am presenting you with a hug and kiss, and she opened it. So I want everyone to see, since she is our light, she has a now
so much
beautiful Havdalah set that she can think about us and, to usher out Shabbat and start a new week. And it's beautiful. So
thank you all so much. It has been my pleasure. And thank you, all of you, for your help and your hard work these years. It has been truly just a pleasure to work with all of you.
This is the beauty of Zoom. It's just, as I said, we're giving you a virtual hug and kiss because we would all be in tears and we'd be crying and hugging and kissing. Yes. And that's, so thank you again. And now, ladies, we are really on schedule. I'm so impressed. Thank you. I mean, this is a new experience for all of us. We're going to take a short break to 12:45. Get up and stretch. You can go pish. There's no waiting in line for the ladies' room. Sorry. You can't meet anybody. You can't start a conversation. And you can go have your lunch and there's nobody to complain to about the food. So, you can have what you want, or you can just stay on and we will chat and we will reconvene at 12:45. So enjoy and thank you for everything. And we have a wonderful afternoon planned. So it's just muzzle tov again to Marilyn and to Joan and take your break.
And do come back and join us at 12:45. We have a full afternoon of great programming.
So go get your coffee or your lunch and everything else. Thank you.